And welcome everyone to another edition of the Spoiler Room. Yes, it is a new month, a new theme, and this month's theme is a theme that some people really enjoyed the name, and my wife said no. So we're still going with it though. With she's Dietrich-iest. Yes, that's right. We are looking at four films from that star Marlene Dietrich from four different decades. So very excited to talk about this. And we have today's film, which is very appropriately named for the spoiler room, film called The Spoilers from 1942. How about that? So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping your favorite drink with us as we talk movie spoilers. Tonight, I am drinking Cider Boys Caramel Apple. Yay. This is really good. I was at a winery event helping my wife sling wine for folks, and we were right next to the Point Brewery booth, and they were giving out samples of this. And this tastes really good. It tastes like caramel apple.
And I've got the Manhattan Special espresso coffee soda from Brooklyn. Or as the doctors in the emergency room at Maimonides Hospital called it when I went in with a tachycardia 15 years ago, a caffeine 8-ball.
All right, so Joe's going to be giving a synopsis because he's going to be running it in about 30 seconds here. So, yes, you heard his dulcet tones. It's none other than man, myth, and legend himself, Mr. Joe Randazzo. Hello, Joe.
Hey, everyone.
So glad to have you. And the man who keeps coming back for more, hopefully, after two kind of films that were a struggle for him, he may have found we've got one that may appealed a little better to him. My right-hand man, Mr. Ian Simmons. Hello, Ian.
They do it for Randolph Scott, and I do it for you, Mark.
Randolph Scott.
Randolph Scott. So that was everybody's introduction in our generation to Randolph Scott. Was a name drop in
yes, in Blazing Saddles. Absolutely, it was definitely. Well, that's
and
what
this,
was
Mark. This movie, I swear to God, is the serious. I mean, it's a comedy sort of, but this is like the movie that Blazing Saddles made fun of. I swear, there's too many connections here. It's great.
Yeah, I felt that way too watching this.
There's a lot of connections when I was watching it as well, which we will definitely dive into. But Joe, you always are so good with these, sir. Can you give the synopsis of The Spoilers?
Well, I was going to read it off this $6 set of 10 Westerns that I got, but all it says is John Wayne, Marlene Dietrich, and Randolph Scott shine in this all-star. God damn it, I can't see it. It's all-star adventure classic about gold and greed in 1890s Alaskan boon towns. So yeah, it doesn't really give much. All right, so Marlene Dietrich is running a bar-ish thing.
Casino bar.
She's in love with John Wayne, who's away on a trip to Europe. He comes back with the same time as a judge and is kind of smitten with the judge's cute daughter. At the same time, John Wayne is swindled out of land, or John Wayne and his partner are swindled out of land by this judge. I'm trying to put it all back together, like in order of everything that happened.
Oh, would you like? I could do it if you.
Yeah, if you could help out if I miss any steps.
Sure.
So yeah, they get swindled out of the mine.
There's before you get to that, Randolph Scott plays Alex McNamara of the Gold Syndicate or whatever. What? Gold Commission. Basically, he's a crooked guy.
Yeah, and he's in league with this judge who we find out is crooked.
Yeah, and the judge shows up with the cute daughter who has met Roy Glenister, played by John Wayne, and they're smitten with each other. But then Roy also has a history with Cherry Malott. I love that name, played by Marlene Dietrich. And there's been claim jumping left and right. In fact, we get text in the beginning that lets you know there's claim jumping, and it's the Wild West in the Northwest of Alaska. And
which looks a lot warmer than I imagined.
What?
It looks a lot warmer than I imagined.
Well, that was also in the opening text bit. They were talking about how before it was cold. It was like downright, hot up there, which is why it's so jarring to me watching a scene where you've got this kind of a stereotypical old west town set complete with the mud/dirt streets and horses and stuff and the wood buildings, and then someone's like, hey, look, the boat's coming in, and they do this like insert of like a ship coming in off the coast of Alaska. I'm like, wait, these are in the same place. It doesn't look like
very beginning. It's very jarring.
Yeah, it really is.
It is. But yes, you're right. Eventually when the judge shows up, he's bringing law and order to the town. And you've come to find out that, there's a nefarious powers at work of the judge, swindling Glenister and his buddy because they apparently have one of the biggest claims in the area. And so, emotions are crossed. You get a love triangle. You get corruption in the law. You get some surprise reveals and an epic showdown as the Glenister and his crew take their claim back, as well as confront McNamara, aka Randolph Scott, which I am sorry, everyone, ahead of time. I will continually hear that in my head every single damn time I say his damn name. But there you go. That sets up, and we'll go with the high level thoughts, and then we'll dive into this. Joe, your high level thought with when you saw this. Is this your first time seeing it?
This is my first time seeing it. I was a little bored by a lot of it up until like the very like last half hour. I just kind of sat there going, okay, this is going to be just about a land swindle and nothing more, but it can't be because you have John Wayne in this, so he's got to at some point, start decking people. I could see why Marlene Dietrich became a star, because she had this sex appeal in this movie that, especially for 1942, like I wasn't really expecting. I've seen her in Touch of Evil, which we'll be talking about in a couple weeks, but I never really like dove deep into her filmography, so I'm not that familiar with a lot of her stuff. Mm-hmm. So that kind of was interesting to me. Is just hearing the way she speaks. She's very naturally flirty in this, and that seems to be maybe her thing. Like maybe like the second coming of Mae West or something. I definitely did not appreciate the heroes in blackface.
No,
that was like,
I mean, it's
a product of its time. You can't really.
It was a product of the time, and initially they did it so that they could hide who they were when they're robbing the bank. It
became a little minstrel show skit when it was back.
And that's the thing, that would have been fine, but then we go into a comedy part with the discussion with the maid, and then that part was just like, I'm like, oh, okay, well, product of its time, 1942. My brain's going, let's just, and I'm like, oh, we're going with this gimmick for a little while now. Oh, okay, all right, well, is what it is.
He said sometimes it's just it's a product of its time. You can,
So,
but I thought the bit with the train at the end, I think I actually really liked. I like the idea of trying to use the train to break into the mine. And there's also like, even when I'm not fully engrossed in these movies, like I think it's just the Universal Monster Kid in me. Like I recognize the sets and then I recognize the bit players, and it gives me like this kind of homey feeling that like maybe I wouldn't normally have if this was done anywhere else. But I all of a sudden, one of the miners, I'm like, wait, is that Glenn Strange? And it is.
Yeah.
He went on to play the Frankenstein monster. So I'm like, oh shit, that is so cool. So that I'm kind of mixed on it, because like the first 45 minutes or so, I was kind of like, okay, can we move this forward? I felt like not much was happening, but then that last half hour or so was really, really good.
Ian, how about you, sir?
It's a mixed bag, because I mean, I think I need to watch this movie again, because I'm sort of with Joe on this, in that there's a lot of plot and a lot of detail in this movie that if you're not paying attention from like frame one, you're going to miss a lot, because it's a lot of like minutia about the claims and who has the right to what and who's coming into town and what all this stuff means. So it's definitely a movie that doesn't hold your hand, but I think by the end of it, it all comes together, and I think it definitely finishes a lot stronger than it starts. Because I love the twists and turns and the relationships between these characters. I was once again, I'm going to beat this dead horse and stand tall in my soapbox. This whole ridiculous notion of there weren't any, female characters who were empowered before, like Princess Leia or Ellen Ripley. It's just false, because watching Marlene Dietrich and what was her name? That she played Helen, Margaret Lindsay.
Yeah.
Their rapport is fantastic. And the guys in this movie, for being this sort of like an old school Western, there is almost a perfect balance between what's going on with the guys in their storyline and the women in theirs. And it shows that they, at one point, Cherry, the Marlene Dietrich character, rescues John Wayne. Who saw that coming? In terms of like keeping him from getting his ass shot during a setup jailbreak. And it was exciting and it was fun. I need to see more Marlene Dietrich, because I didn't quite get that star factor from her in this movie. And I think part of that is because of what we talked about earlier. She is just Lily von Stupp from Blazing Saddles. I could not separate her in my brain from Madeline Kahn. She even talked, Kahn was doing a bit of an exaggeration, but it's essentially the same voice. But no, I really dug this movie. And, I wasn't expecting the train set piece, especially after they crash and you've got two factions shooting each other with guns, using the train as like, the fortress. And then that absolutely spectacular barroom brawl, and just the way that it was filmed from like the high up angles and like getting all around. And they just looked like John Wayne and Randolph Scott were actually beating the shit out of each other. I mean, there's like torn clothes, there's blood everywhere, they're flying through windows. I mean, like, what is this movie? So yeah, I think I'll like it a lot more whenever I watch it again, but the first time, not really knowing what I was getting into, it was a bit kind of rough in parts.
Yeah, and see, I was all in on this, but from the start, yeah, I really enjoyed it quite a bit. I liked the banter back and forth, but what was catching me with the banter, and not just the part with the explaining, not in detail, but just using the terms and everything about the claim jumping and that, and trying to figure that part out, because you're right, they don't hold your hand on that, because this is 1942. They're like, yeah, you guys know about this, right? But I like it because it almost has a spirit of a noir film.
It does.
At least the first half of it, with the, your more heavy dialogue and the relationships and the different wild characters you have, and you're trying to feel out the characters. Glenister's a playboy. Go figure. John Wayne is the playboy in this. He's got Cherry Malott, who they've got a history with. But then he's also got Margaret, Lindsay's Helen Chester, who seems a little bit more, not quite as not like Cherry. Cherry is
Not as
definitely
worldly.
is not as worldly of a woman, and he seems smitten with her. And I loved the twist that they did with her, because they really, and that's the thing, is they really do a good setup with this relationship, and especially with Helen Chester's character, playing her as the good woman versus, the opposite of Cherry of sorts. She's the very on straight and narrow, where Cherry is flirtatious. I mean, she's a strong woman, but she's definitely a different personality. And then we come to find out 2/3 of the way through the film, oh no, Helen Chester, she's in with her judge dad, and she's kind of going along with this idea that they're going to rip off Glenister, because you think the judge is kind of on the up and up until you get that scene later on where he's with McNamara, but there's no real hint that the judge is really being crooked, at all. So I thought they hid that well.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, I don't think she discovered that she was part of a plot, but she was not in on it or into it.
That's true. Yeah.
There's a scene. It's after the kind of the courtroom bit where we go back to the hotel, and it's the lawyer, the judge, and McNamara all like kind of laughing and practically breaking open champagne about how they screwed John Wayne's character, and then you cut to Helen in the corner like, Dad,
Yeah.
this isn't exactly what I signed up for. But no, the character dynamics I think are great because in another movie, Helen would have been the buttoned up, the opposite of the cool chick. She was the one that John Wayne falls for, but they're not meant to be together. And it's going to come out that she's really she would have been part of that villainous cadre. But in this movie, she's just that. Helen and Cherry are just different people. And when they size each other up as the boats are coming in, you can see they're sizing each other up. They're kind of like protected. They're marking their territory without, actually getting into a cat fight. But you can understand why, because they've both been kind of charmed by this guy, and they both have feelings for him, but they can't, both have them. It's just nice to see these kinds of like well fleshed out characters acting like actual people rather than they're just like cogs in a screenplay that is going to kind of cheat its way around to the ending that it wants.
Yeah, I like the story, the screenplay. We've got Glenister's buddy Dextry, played by the wonderful Harry Carey in this, who is also friends with Cherry, and so he's kind of like the father figure to both of them. And I loved his character and his Betsy. Oh, Betsy has a problem with going off once in a while. Dude, easy, Betsy.
Yeah, when he shoots the lawyer at the end, he's like, "That's enough now, Betsy."
It's enough now, Betsy.
Or even early on when he's just like shooting the
paper,
the paper, and it's odd because he's shooting down, yet somehow he's shooting the paper that's in the lawyer's head.
minor.
or he's just that good that he knows how to bank that bullet off the ground into the paper. It could be either one.
I bet on that. Yeah,
I would doubt it too. But yeah, Dextry, you've got that relationship between him and Glenister. We're gonna beat the drum, folks, and we will continue. Old films handle multiple characters a shit ton better than most of the new films, because even the side characters in this, where we get Flapjack Sim, played by Russell Simpson, and he's the guy who's we learned his claim was jumped, and they do this little subplot with him that I thought, that was going to go away, but it doesn't. It works into the judge angle with it, for the judge coming off as legitimate by giving Flapjack his claim back. But I loved that little story that they had there with his partner. They were kind of like R2-D2 and C-3PO in a way.
I just want to reinforce, Mark, 1 hour and 27 minutes.
Yes.
You get all of this stuff. I mean, this is like twice the modern movie crammed into less the runtime of one. It's pretty amazing. Now, yes, it gets a bit convoluted in parts and it doesn't move as briskly, I think, to mine and Joe's taste.
Yeah.
But again, I think I'm going to like this a lot more when I watch it again. But it just goes to show, like, I love movies that within the first like 15 minutes, you feel like you've been watching them for an hour in the best way, because they're so efficient at establishing who everybody is, what they want, what the stakes are, instead of just kind of meandering about. And my estimation of this film is growing as I talk about it.
Well, it's screenwriting 101. Every single scene you write needs to answer who wants what from whom and what are they willing to do to get it. And that's what this movie does. Is there's no meandering. There's no
look at I will say within the 4 minutes that we get introduced to Cherry, we know we understand a lot about her. Like pretty much everything about her, as far as where she is in town, her status, how people see her, everything. Within less than 4 minutes, her. And then McNamara as well. When she goes to try to save Flapjack's claim because she helped him get the claim, and she's pulling the paper and she's trying to stick it into her stocking, and then McNamara, first time we see him, he catches her before she puts the paper away, and they have that wonderful exchange, innuendo exchange, because we're talking 1942, and there's innuendo all over this film. But then you, just by doing that, you know what type of guy McNamara is within that little scene with Cherry, and then you just go from there, and it's like you understand who these characters are. It's kind of what you're saying, Ian, is that you feel like you've been with these characters a lot longer than you actually have because of the way they're written and acted, I think.
Well, I think it also helps that you've got these great, actors. I mean, that's the thing is, maybe it's because I was not exactly tuned in on who was doing what to whom and when, but I thought Randolph Scott's character McNamara was going to be sort of the hero who has to kind of take, maneuver around the scoundrel John Wayne. But they're both kind of scoundrels, and McNamara turns out to be the real villain of the piece, which is great because Randolph Scott has this heroic kind of visage. He's the perfect guy to play me and this judge, we're gonna bring law to this lawless territory, and we're gonna make a pretty penny doing it. I also love the fact that the judge and also the lawyer were both from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes.
And they kept singing Buffalo Girls, Won't You Come Out Tonight all throughout this movie. But It's a Wonderful Life and Blazing Saddles. I could not get those movies out of my head watching the spoilers.
Maybe Frank Capra actually saw this movie and actually liked it.
Maybe.
So It's a Wonderful Life is only 4 or 5 years later. So
yeah. Not too much later. And I actually liked The Very Muddy Road, because usually with Westerns, it's the clean, dusty road type of deal, even in the older Westerns. But this felt like a town, a actual town from 1900, because that's what
that was actually lived in. Yeah,
that was lived in, authentic. No, the most that they have is a board that is still muddy, but at least is a board for those ladies like Cherry who have a nice dress to try to walk across the road so they don't sink into the mud like everybody else does.
Well, I mean, that's a great detail, because you don't have to show any of that. You don't have to show people trudging around in the mud or anything, but they get you right down in there and see. I think, you see the couple of the prospectors walking across it too. I'm like, and I kept wondering, is that where sidewalks came from? I don't know, but probably not. But there's something to think about.
Well, yeah, that was always funny, is the prospectors and guys, they didn't care about the board. They just walked right across the slop. It was like the folks in the nicer dress walked across the boards. And so, I mean, the town's got its own character as well, with its extras and that. The way they set everything up in here, I think that's what pulled me into this film and just kept me interested, was one, the kind of the noir type flair to the beginning with the dialogue, and then the setting and everything, just how, and it's amazing too, because this starts off a very light, brisk, almost you get this wonderful scene where there's a owner of a hotel, basically, or rooms for rent, basically. And he's pulling this guy out, this one prospector who's a little drunk. He's like, I got the $15. He's like, look, I don't have any rooms left. And just as he finishes that, there's a gun sounds and a dead body rolls down the stairs, and he goes, oh, you know what? You can take room 24.
So good. That's the other thing, though. I was looking at the prices. I mean, this is supposed to be 1900, and it's like a ham and egg dinner is $5, and then the room for rent is $15. I'm like, holy shit! But then I realized it's up in the middle of nowhere, so of course everything's gonna be ungodly expensive.
I've got the numbers for that, because we do that here in the spoiler room all year with these classics.
We're doing early this week.
But first, we'll say good morning, Polar Knights. So glad you could join us from Norway, and thank you for tuning in. We appreciate that as we talk the spoilers. But I looked it up. Someone already figured it out. The ham and eggs for breakfast was $5 back in 1900, which would be today the equivalent of $186.95.
Man, people talk about inflation now. Shit.
Well, and then you think about it, the room was $15.
Oh no.
So you're talking $500 for the room, at
Which
least.
can be something you see depending on where you go. You go to New York or LA, you'll get a $500, or Chicago, you'll get a $500 a night room.
But here's the thing, like that's New York or Chicago.
I know.
This is like Nome, Alaska in 1900. I'm wondering if that room came with companionship at that point.
No, but I read up on it as well, and apparently that was common practice in prospector towns because people were finding gold in the hills, so they were gouging prices on purpose because guys were finding gold in the hills. To give you a perspective, 1 ounce of gold in 1900 was worth $20. So say you found a vein, say you had a claim, and you had pounds of gold that you were pulling from it, like the Midas one or whatever, and so the $20 in 1900 was worth about $748 today's paper, so
that's still messed up. Like, hey, look, I found an ounce of gold. Now I can afford lunch.
Yeah. Right. I'm just saying though that there is the little perspective. It does seem high, but at the same time, during that prospector time, these guys are coming into money, which is why there was the claim jumping left and right, and why it was like the Wild West in Alaska.
I mean, price gouging like this still happens. You go to Coachella, there's nothing else there. You're going to spend, $10, $15 on a bottle of water. So
you go to the Wisconsin Dells, and you go to Mount Olympus Water Park, and a bottle of beer is like, I'm probably by now $10 or $11 for a single bottle, and I'm like, that should be illegal in Wisconsin. Okay.
Well, hell, you go to a ball game. So
ball game.
When you're in an area where you're like, okay, we have people here that are captive in a way, they can't really go anywhere. Yeah, we'll just. And they're making money, or they have money. We're going to take that money away from you.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So I mean, it's the price gouging is surprising, but yet at the same time, when I saw the explanation, I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Hey, these guys can afford it, so I'm going to be a business owner, because there's that running gag. Which, what's funny is the running gag in this would have still been relevant 2 years ago, when they were talking about the price of eggs. Remember when the price of eggs went up during the pandemic? I'm like I'm watching them talk about.
It never went down. I mean,
it barely went down. It went down here a little bit, but and so I was like, the price of eggs. I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of a relevant issue, the eggs being pricey.
Oh yeah.
What is also interesting with this, and what I liked, is that, okay, it's an Alaskan prospector town, but Cherry Malott isn't running a cat house as far as we know.
That could be Hays Code.
It could be Hays Code. I'm thinking this is Hays Code working into it, because she runs a casino, and I'm just like, 1900 prospector town, strong female character running the casino that has the respect and knows everybody's business. I'm like, there's only one step away from your stereo.
She's a madam.
Your trope of a madam. They don't have her that way. But now that you mentioned it, yeah, Hays Code probably had a little bit of, especially in 42.
I'm surprised at how many hints there were that people were sleeping around without being married.
Oh yeah.
Because you would think the Hays Code would make that impossible to, to put out there.
Well, it's that metaphor and dialogue, though. It's like they're not really coming out and saying such things. But that's why I was intrigued by this film from the start, because trading back and forth, especially when they were, first introducing these characters, and she was kind of putting on the charm. I'm like, wow, there's a lot being said here without being directly said. And I'm like, that's pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean, and Randolph Scott, it's interesting because I read that Randolph actually wanted to play the Glenister character. So apparently him and Wayne, go figure, had a clash of egos and didn't get along too well.
So that fight at the end was probably just them like
That's why it looks so real.
yeah, that was before they started filming. They were just like, that was when the, Randolph Scott found out he wasn't going to get the part he wanted.
But yeah,
Ultimately, I think he got the better part of the two because I would rather be McNamara. He just gets the true scenery.
Thanks to trivia, and that's why I love these older films because there's always so much trivia. Yeah, they had tension because Scott's contract with Universal had entitled him to billing above John Wayne, who was on loan from Republic, because we're talking the old studio system in 42.
And Republic was not a big studio at the time, so
right,
yeah.
But McNamara wanted the Glenister character, so here you have this guy from this smaller studio coming in and playing the role you wanted to play, even though he had title. So apparently, Dietrich helped distract Wayne on outings to restaurants and sporting events, as well as hunting and fishing trips on weekends, because Wayne also had a separation, so he was a bit depressed. So he had pressure.
Is this more of that Hays Code speech? Distracted him on outings to restaurants and fishing.
Outings and restaurant. We don't know. Quit, you know. You know. And did you know this is the 4th of 5 tellings of this story?
Really?
The spoilers based off of Rex Beach's novel, previous versions was 1914, 1923, 1930, and then there was one after this, 1955.
So are the
Spider-Man
1914, is that lost?
No, they're all the
they also exist?
Prints of all 5 versions of the spoilers have survived.
All right.
So, which made me curious. I'm like, I don't want to do it today because we got the podcast. I'm like, but I want to go back now and watch those other versions.
I'm gonna see if I can find them. That'd be kind of cool. Who's in the 30s version? That's probably the one that would have anybody that we'd recognize, probably in 30s.
In the 30s version, that was directed by Edwin Carraway, and it had Gary Cooper as Roy Glenister, Kay Johnson as Helen Chester, Betty Compson as Cherry Malott, and William Stage Boyd as Alec McNamara.
Right. Well, William Boyd, I know, was in a lot of westerns.
Yeah,
Gary Cooper. Yeah, I'm surprised I don't know about it.
So we gotta find it. Apparently, Gary Cooper was in this one as well. So that's interesting.
Mark, you got to find a themed month one of these years with 5 months, because we can revisit this and the other 4, and you call it Spoilers Alert Month.
Yeah, we could try that. We could try that. But yeah, it's interesting that it was made 3 times before this.
I mean, that was common back then, though.
Right, but I mean, 1914, that's going way back. I mean, because this novel wasn't written too far after the 1900s. So, I mean, that's interesting with that story. I mean, that's fresh.
What probably happened was, were they all Universal? Maybe Universal owned the rights, and you're just like, let's just film this again, and film it again, and film it again. That could be the case. I mean, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was made in 1913, twice in 1920, 1931, 1941. So that, this was pretty common practice at that point.
Yeah, the production.
I mean, especially when you were going from silent to talkies, there were a lot of movies from the 1920s that got remade in the 1930s because now we have sound.
Yeah, because now you have sound, and that's what you do is you got sound now. We're gonna redo this, and then. It can work sometimes, and sometimes it can't. But yeah, we get this love triangle. We get this square. Love square because you've got McNamara, you got Glenister, you got Cherry, and you got Helen, and the 2 guys are vying for the attention of the. Well, 2 of the ladies. McNamara doesn't care so much for doesn't really pursue Helen so much, as just keeping her from telling Glenister about their plot to take his land, his claim.
Well, at one point, I towards the end, I started wondering if Glenister and McNamara wanted each other, because McNamara's like, I don't have a gun, and then Glenister's like, we'll settle this the old-fashioned way. He throws his gun away, and then he jumps on him like he's gonna fight him, but he jumps like onto him. They fall back onto a bed right between McNamara's legs. I'm like, okay.
they're gonna settle it old school.
The interesting thing is that Charity go, well, did you have to break my fucking window with the gun? Like, I understand. Like, they just dropped the gun on the ground right there. You would have, like, winged it out the window, broke the glass. Yeah, they did a lot of property damage.
Oh, they do it.
They're destroying everything in that bar.
Yeah, they destroy everything because
vents and
because
the roulette table's gone. Yeah, it's
because McNamara, after they do one person we did talk about was Richard Barthelmess's character, another layer of characters. Again, this is only an hour and 28 minutes. Bronco Kid, the loyal right hand person to Cherry, who also carries a torch for Cherry. I thought that was an interesting little subplot they have, especially how it affects the whole bank robbery angle that they were trying to get Glenister's safe back.
And he kind of came off like an old-timey gangster.
Yeah.
That's the thing that stuck out about him, is that he wouldn't have been like out of places like, like a Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney, Edward G. Robinson movie at this time. Yeah. And I kept expecting him to kind of, go after, what's John Wayne's character's name again? Glenister. I kept expecting him to actually do something and maybe end up having to get killed by John Wayne, but that doesn't really happen.
There's a great scene where he's doing a bit of business where he's just playing with his knife, his little stiletto, and it's just glinting off the camera, just keeps catching it. It's very bright. But he's basically the Ducky of this movie, where Pretty in Pink and No Molasta. And at the end, I can't explain it, but I was deeply affected by his death scene. When Glenister goes and he finds his body kind of laying over part of the train, and he scoops him up and lays him down, and he says, did you get your mind back? And it's just something so sad. You can see that he understood that he was dying. It wasn't your typical old movie death. There was something really cool to watch there, and very sad.
Yeah, it was really weird. I felt for him too. You actually kind of feel for this guy the whole time, because he's holding the torch for Cherry, and you're like, dude, that's never gonna happen, even before she says it.
Yeah,
and he's always playing with his knife. I was waiting for him to stab someone, though. He never stabs anyone.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, okay, he's he comes off like I said, like a gangster, so you expect him to at some point either defending her honor or just because John Wayne is no, you're the reason I can't have the woman I love. It never happens.
Well, he tried during the bank robbery, and that's what ended up getting Glenister framed for the death of a sheriff, because he hid in the shadows because he knew the bank robbery was going to happen, because Glenister wanted his safe back, which the judge absconded, though the judge said he wouldn't abscond it, but they absconded anyway. So that's where the blackface comes in. They try to hide in the shadows, painting themselves all dark, and so they're not recognized. I'm like, the minute John Wayne speaks, they're going to recognize your voice, John. Don't.
Yeah, the whole plan falls apart the moment you speak there, Pilgrim.
Yeah. So there's that, but. So our guy Bronco is hiding in the shadows. Yeah, a la gangster villain. This is truly Chicago gangster. He's hiding and he pulls out his gun, and he's going to make Glenister gets shot during the bank robbery, which actually, I'm looking at this. We don't get any exposition. We don't get any of that. But you know what his intentions are when he shows up and pulls the gun watching them do the bank. I'm like, you understand completely what Bronco's thinking is on this. And then the sheriff gets in the way just as he shoots. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go now. And they do it too. It's a great camera angle because Glenister's coming out of the bank and he's looking at the people in the bank. The sheriff comes out with his gun drawn just as Bronco shoots. So when the body falls, though, you see Wayne having his gun pointed at the sheriff. So it's like, it even makes the audience think, wait, did he pull the trigger? I mean, he did, but still, it's like that little detail. And there's some other things like that, too. And I'm like, and Bronco, which is hilarious, Bronco, even though he feels this way towards Glenister, he's so devoted to Cherry. He goes with Glenister on the train to go get the claim back and ends up sacrificing himself in the process.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like you expect this guy to do something really terrible or turn heel, but he doesn't. He's a dangerous guy, but he's a good guy at heart to the end, and that's why I think I was so affected by his death. You've got that, but then you've also got these weird comedic moments, like when Glenister shows up back to the hotel, and the maid Idabel opens the door, and he comes walking in. He's still got the black face on. He's got his hat tilted down, and he's doing the worst accent. But that comes back to a bit where he eventually gets out of those clothes. He's talking to Cherry, and then McNamara and his goons show up to arrest him, and that's where the alibi story kicks in. And Cherry's like, well, he's been here with me the entire night. You can see, you came up here because you thought he was going to be here. So what are you doing here? And then Idabel comes in and she's like, I can't get this blanket coming out of these clothes. And then, he's busted, which is, I like these little twists and turns. That's like something out of a Billy Wilder movie, that whole moment there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, never mind the fact that we also get John Wayne in a feathered boa.
Yeah, that was the detail I missed. That's straight out of Some Like It Hot. It's wonderful.
John Wayne, man of men's back then, in a feathered boa. It's like, well, I mean, this is still, see every day.
Well, this is still pretty early on, and that's the other thing I was not expecting about this. Is this was not John Wayne as the heroic cowboy character. He's sort of like this, almost an everyman, but he's a rogue. He's a player. He's out on the frontier, but he's like kind of a snazzy dresser. He's not, in his in his like spurs and 10-gallon hat or whatever. It was just a nice dimension to see him play here. I did like that whole exchange with Idabel, and I won't use the entire expression, but she essentially, when she realizes that he's not, a black person, she's like, "You're not black, you're washable."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he refers to it, "I gotta get out of this Alabama tan." I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we said earlier, a product of its time. Because
that's it's interesting because I was thinking about this. Like, I mean, I'm not offended by this stuff, because I am of mixed race, as they say. But I was thinking, like, you flash forward to 1982, and you've got Trading Places, one of the number one comedies of that year, and you've got Dan Aykroyd playing a Rastafarian. You've got movies like White Chicks, which is sort of like, you've got the Wayans brothers dressed up as basically
two white girls,
not the Kardashians, the Hiltons.
The Hiltons.
Well,
yeah,
and you even have, though it is a very talented comedian, and it was during the Cold War, you have Moscow on the Hudson with Robin Williams doing.
That was the era of Yakov Smirnoff.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Team America World Police. I mean, that's the thing. It's like racial humor has been around forever.
I personally, I a couple of the lines I loved in here, and that's the other thing too that kept me interested, was the dialogue. Just back and forth dialogue with these lines. Like every other line, I'm just trying to catch. Like you get these two side character, the character talking to the owner of the restaurant, and he goes, "Oh, eggs are so pricey, it makes you want to marry a hen." And the guy goes, "I did marry one, only she can't lay no eggs."
Yeah.
And then that other one was Ida Bell was saying, "Yeah, Hope, do you see any colored folks coming on the boat? Because I'm tired of pretending Eskimos are from Virginia."
Yes.
Yeah, that was early.
I'm like, whoa, okay.
But I mean, it's also it's a joke, and it's kind of shocking language, but it also says something about her character, how she sticks out,
Right.
because she's not with the people she grew up with, let's just say, and the only people of color around are Eskimos, and you don't see a lot of them hanging out in that prospector town. So it does kind of talk to that degree of alienation. But talking about like dialogue, Mark, there's McNamara has a line. He says, "Get yourself a sip of warm lemonade before you break out into a rash of righteousness." I think he was talking to Helen. Like, wow,
yeah.
So good.
But
I mean, that's what sets these movies apart back then, because the dialogue in these often is really snappy, fast moving stuff. Like even the bad ones, like even the bad movies have decent dialogue.
It's an art that, well, just in general, because if you look at the tone and where this film goes from where it starts to where it ends, it starts off lighter in the beginning, but the way they paint this town, I'm like, it's just to where they've got the jokes and the one-liners in that, but at the same time, it still feels real of sorts. It may be a little exaggerated, but not nearly to what we see. And I'll bring it up with more modern comedies, where this one gives you a nice balance where it starts off lighter and it heads into some of the deeper weeds later on, but it eases you into it. And at the same time, it's not afraid to be just a little hair goofy and still bring you the seriousness. And that's what I liked about it.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's not a one note, one track thing. It's got a little bit of everything, which makes it feel like a slightly exaggerated version of real life. It's great.
Well, especially with the Flapjack character, because we meet him in the beginning and you think he's just the goofy guy who's talking about wanting to get guns and make a claim, and you're like, oh, that's not going to happen. But later on, we see him trying to do a duel in the middle of the road with a guy and calls him out. And that's where we get the introduction of, supposedly the virtue of McNamara and McAllister, Glenister, where Glenister's walking up and he's seeing this, and a guy comes out and he's going to blindside Flapjack, but then Glenister punches him, and then McNamara is like, "Hey, good job, buddy." And then and then you go to Flapjack, who's just been he's just been grazed.
Oh yeah, he was hoping to die, which is a weird scene.
He was so disappointed he wasn't going to die, and then his buddy's like, "Damn it, I was that close to having my own mind." But that whole exchange only goes for like 20 seconds, and that's what I love. Like you guys are saying too, that's what I loved about the dialogue in this film, is that it's back and forth. It's like, they're not wasting a lot of time between most of their dialogue. And there's a lot of cameras too, especially with this final fight, which I think is one of the longer fisticuff fights that were filmed. It goes a good 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah, I kept thinking it was going to end, and it just kept going, and they just kept destroying more parts of the bar.
Which is why if Mel Brooks was actually satirizing this movie in Blazing Saddles, it was perfect, because the only way to keep it interesting was to have it breaking through other sets to different kinds of movies.
According to trivia, it actually clocks in at just under 4 minutes, one of the longer cinematic fist fights. But with the trivia, I think I was reading somewhere too that it took them like, was it like 5 days and to plan out, and it took like cameras, like they had a lot of cameras. There it is. According to the press release by Universal, 15 cameras were used to shoot the climactic fight scene.
15,
which included a 7-ton crane, which is probably how they got the top-down shots from the balcony, was the crane. But apparently they used a total of 15 cameras, and if I read somewhere else, it did take them like 5 days to shoot that whole scene.
That part definitely makes sense to me. That it took
Yeah.
about 5 days to shoot. That figures.
Yeah. Because they had to plot it out and shoot. I'm going to say it right now, though, and maybe it's because I've watched just too many movies. When they're fighting and they're beating the snot and they're destroying tables and they get behind the bar and he throws, and they're getting, and then just when you think it's about to end, John Wayne is standing in front of the window that goes to the outside of the bar, and he had knocked McNamara down, and I said it. I'm like, someone's going through a window. I'm like, someone's going through a window. And sure enough, they both go through the window.
But all that said, I did appreciate that when John Wayne, Glenister, is being kind of escorted back into the bar after he's emerged victorious from beating the crap out of McNamara on the street. He looks like hell. I mean, he's wobbly, he's cut, he's all kind of fucked up. It's not like this heroic, triumphant moment. He looks like the actor was physically roughed up for 5 days.
He might have been.
And they leave McNamara face down in the mud too. He's like,
no, he was face up.
Oh,
because you could see him, his chest. You could see him breathing. I spent a lot of time on that holding on that shot. I thought for sure he was like gonna come to and have like one last charge at Glenister or something, but no, just down for the count.
Yeah, and he doesn't die, though he's a villain. I mean, it's like.
Well, neither does the God, what was the judge's daughter?
Oh,
she doesn't either.
Yeah.
She and the judge, they have, the judge kind of has a change of heart, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna hightail it out of here. It work out, but it's not for the lawyer.
And one final thing I want to bring up is the lawyer for Glenister. They do this wonderful thing where it's great because they suspect that they're going to get railroaded, no pun intended, over this claim. And so they come up with this idea of having the lawyer for Glenister, Bennett, go down to Seattle to get a proper judge to look at the case. And our judge up here knows, oh, well, the gig will be up if they do that. So they try to make a deal with the captain to not allow Bennett on the boat. And the captain's like, I can't afford not to. But he's also buddies with Glenister. So they come up with this idea of, well, what if
5 miles out?
If you're 5 miles out, you just come across a guy in a boat, and and he's like, oh, well, maritime tradition means I've got to pick up a stranded individual. And what's great is we don't get that scene because of budget, but they do talk about it because suddenly the judge,
he's got him backed up against the wall. It's like, wait, you couldn't foresee this?
And so this is a fun movie. This was a lot of fun. I could see the appeal of Marlene Dietrich because whether or not you see her full star power, she's got presence on the screen when she's there. She just takes control of the scene. That's why it's interesting when you get all-star films like this and you have Randolph Scott, you've got John Wayne, and you got Marlene Dietrich all in the same scene, and you're just sitting there going, okay, who's going to try to, take over this scene? And none of them really do because they're all three are so good. It's just like, it just makes for a great scene.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's easy to forget because they're such pop cultural icons that they were actors. You know, it's you just did your John Wayne impression there, Mark, and it was pretty good. But that's an exaggeration of how
Right.
Wayne was never a well. I haven't seen every John Wayne movie, but the movies I have seen him in, he's always very good, and he puts in a performance. He has a distinct presence, which is easy to parody, but he wasn't bad in these movies, even when the movies were not that great. So yeah, and that's what we have here. I haven't quite seen him play something like this. But it's fascinating with Marlene Dietrich. Yeah, again, I'm interested to see these other films we have on deck for the next month, because watching this, I was like, yeah, I don't quite get it. And on top of that, I think this is gonna sound terrible. I was expecting someone who was more conventionally attractive. My assessment of Marlene Dietrich is she's a very handsome woman. I was just like, there's something like very cold and very like
Well, you'll see her as a femme
masculine about
fatale in
her.
2 weeks. I've never seen Blonde Venus either, so I'm going in blind like you guys are.
Or going in blonde, as the case may be.
Or going in blind.
I did read somewhere that she was wearing a wig for a good portion of this movie too.
I believe it. Well, yeah, because the way that hair, trying to keep that hair like that would have been probably taken too long. Maybe people throw things out going, oh, they were wearing a wig. I'm like, they only have a certain amount of shoot time. And if you're sitting there having to try to match the hair from the one scene you shot yesterday to the scene today versus a wig that's already made, you just
Right.
Her
hair was crazy in this movie, though. Like
it was.
Oh man,
and her wardrobe too. I love. I mean, like almost every other scene, she has like a different dress on. Look, period. Specific, and she wore it well and everything. But it's just the costuming. That's what I like too. The costuming in this too. You don't really have bad guy costuming in here at all.
Well, except the lawyer for the judge. I mean, it's not so much his costume. He just looks like a Weasley dude. So when you first see him, you know he's going to be the snide villain.
Well, and that's the other thing, is because when he shows up in It's a Wonderful Life, he was the tax auditor guy who'd come to like bust George Bailey, and so at the end when you see him, just ripping up the warrant or whatever, and just like, yeah, everything is gonna be fine. But no, to your point, Mark, there isn't like any bad guy wardrobe in this, and I think that's specifically because they are posed as the law. So they don't want to draw attention to their to their wicked ways.
Wayne in this reminded me, his Glenister, if I would to liken it to any of his previous roles, felt a little bit like what we would see later in The Irishman, or not The Irishman. What's it called? In Ireland, where he's in Ireland. Damn it, I forgot the name. My friend would kill me because he loved the film. Crap. It's gone away.
Ireland. I'm not a big John Wayne. I'm flipping through his movies right now.
I'm God dang it. I'm trying to remember the Quiet Man.
I haven't seen The Quiet Man.
The Quiet Man. It reminds me of his role in The Quiet Man of sorts. If you want a kind of a comparison to his performance, kind of a character like that. Not so playboy, but just the non-stereotypical manly cowboy that he's usually tagged with. That's that trope of John Wayne. Unless he's playing Genghis Khan, which is a whole other ball of wax altogether.
No, when you said A Quiet Man, I just got an image of John Wayne in A Quiet Place. What do you mean I can't talk? I'm gonna talk if I wanna. Yeah.
You're gonna take Haruka Saki over to that hill, and you're gonna take that Ying Chang, and it just didn't work. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, Matt Damon did that a few years ago. What was that?
The Great Wall.
The Great Wall.
The Great Wall. Yeah, the Great Wall. We won't talk about what that.
I don't think he was in Yellowface in that though.
No, he wasn't. No, he just played.
Which kind of made it worse.
He just played the golden Westerner,
the white savior.
The white savior. He played the white savior in that for the most part. Yes. So.
To me, that expression always sounded like it should be a Yankee Candle scent.
And on that note, I think we're going to end it. Polar Knights, we're not really a gaming podcast, but Polar Knight had a question for you, Ian. You look like you know your games, he says.
My mind games, sure.
My dad did buy a handheld game, plus it looks like the original Game Boy, but is unbranded. Know anything about it?
Weird question.
No, it's but to answer your question, because we do that here, if it's what I think you're looking at, it is probably a knockoff or possibly it's probably a knockoff because like Radio Shack did that for many years. They had the non-branded, almost similar looking device that wasn't a Game Boy, but wow, it played similar to Game Boys. And by the way, it was Game Boy compatible with not all games, but other electronic devices. Radio Shack used to have those knockoff type electronics.
Oh, they even had some knockoff Transformer toys, I think.
Oh yeah,
at one point, yeah.
Yeah, I had a knockoff LCD video game that handheld game that I used to play constantly. It was about this big. I remember it. It was red, and it was an LCD like the old watches. So it was just black and gray, and you just moved this little ship up and down. And I played that thing constantly because you could take it in the car and whatnot. But then, being Wisconsin, I left it in the car one night, and it was during the winter. And let's just say the liquid crystal display didn't quite display like it used to. So it was kind of hard to tell where your ship was after a while.
Oh, yeah.
But I digress. The spoilers. Final thought. Ian, you first, sir. Your final thought with the spoilers.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those movies I feel weird evaluating because I just saw it, and after this conversation, again, it's skyrocketed in my estimation. So yeah, I recommend it. It's it's a lot. If you like westerns, it's still going to be kind of unexpected, I think, partially because of the comedic angle. Plus, it's got a lot of like adventure and action, excitement. But it's also takes place in Alaska, which is very strange in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you don't think of it.
It has that flavor.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, it is jarring. I did have to go back and rewind when they cut from the western kind of muddy street to, hey, look, there's a ship come up on the coastline. I'm like, oh, that's right, that's Alaska. I'm expecting like tumbleweeds and cacti or something. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you think California for gold, so it's just putting it in Alaska itself and really giving you that feel like this is not a dusty western town. Already changes the environment of it quite a bit. What about you, Joe?
Well, like Ian, I find it growing in my estimation as I discuss this movie with you guys. It still felt like that first half hour. Like I get that they were just dumping all this information on us, but once it picks up, it really picks up. And I've seen a couple movies by this director before. So one of them was actually the sequel to Angels with Dirty Faces called Angels Wash Their Faces with Ronald Reagan and Ann Sheridan and the East Side Kids. I've enjoyed a lot of his movies, so this one, it's gonna go up there with them. I think this is like the fourth. I think it was the fourth or fifth movie of his I've seen. Might be second or third because there's Angels Wash Their Faces, which I really like. There's this Bogart movie he made called The Wagons Roll at Midnight, which was also really good. But yeah, really enjoy it once it starts getting going. I just felt like it took a little while to get there, but maybe now going back and it happens when I watch a movie a second time. I'll be like, oh, okay, I get why this had to happen here. I didn't remember it. And then, knowing what happens at the end, now it'll all connect maybe. And so, yeah, I think, if you like Westerns, this is, I think this will work for you.
Yeah, and I agree too. While it's in Alaska, it still has the Western feel to it.
I mean, Alaska is in the West.
And it is Northwest, yes. But what gets me even more is if you look at this film, now it did get nominated for an Oscar for the art direction for the set and
I
the
can see that.
costume. Yeah, so it did get nominated for an Oscar because it looks, the set pieces and everything. But that's the thing. There's actually not a lot of set pieces for a Western. We only get like one out of town scene, and that's by the Midas mine. Otherwise, everything takes place in town, on smaller sets, except for the saloon. So it's real interesting to see where the budget of this film went. It probably went mostly to the star power of this
Although I
movie.
don't know how much money Wayne was commanding at this time, because
this
he was a
was mid-
star, but I don't think he was like a massive star yet.
No, but this was midway through his career. I mean, he and Dietrich both had been doing it for at least 10 or 15 years before.
Well, I guess Stagecoach would have been the one that changed the trajectory.
Yeah,
that was a couple years before this.
And Randolph Scott as well, who'd been in a lot. So even though it is a studio film, so they're all on probably, they weren't exactly getting paid like actors do today. It still probably was a pretty penny to put those folks in this film. But yeah, it's fun. I enjoy it quite a bit. It definitely ends really strong. And it's a breezy watch. It really is a breezy watch. So if you like any of the actors we mentioned tonight, I would recommend it as well. I didn't know what we were going to get going into it because I hadn't seen it, and I was pleasantly surprised. So, especially with some of the twisted turns we got. So, thank you, Polar Knights, and our other viewers tonight for watching our live stream. And as always, I give my wonderful panel their license to shill. So, Ian, you're first tonight, sir. Go ahead and shill away what you got.
I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com. And I'm also right here on YouTube. You can find me if you go to YouTube and type in Kicking the Seat. I'm right there. I'm also here on Monday nights talking with you fine folks about Marlene Dietrich and a galaxy of other movies that I've never seen before. Some of them I've never heard of, but it's always rewarding, even when I don't like the movies. As you may have noticed the last couple of weeks, I at least enjoy the conversations. So thanks for having me, as always.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoy the conversations, and we're always happy to have you here, sir, and have you keep coming back, even if it is not the best movie. And Joe, go ahead, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, I'm Joe Randazzo with the Literary License Podcast. At some point soon, hopefully, we'll be recording the Dracula Murders in the Rue Morgue podcast that I've been talking about for weeks now. But you can find us basically on any podcast service, whether it's Apple, Google, whatever. Just look up Literary License, and we will pop up. That's all I got to show this week.
Yeah, check out his stuff, and he does some film stuff too, so check out his film thing.
Nothing that's coming out right now, though. So.
No, but you still got stuff out there that people can find, Caesar and Otto and all that.
Oh, yeah, well, Deadly Xmas, 'tis the season.
Deadly Xmas.
Well, I can start pushing that soon.
That's what I was going to say.
We're going to be getting a Christmas slasher.
That's right. It's on my shelf, Caesar and Otto's Deadly Christmas, so check that out. And thank you, Joe, for being here as always.
Thanks for having me on, man. I love being on this.
Oh, we appreciate you here in a welcome edition, and welcome to all our new subscribers and all our new listeners. We appreciate every single one of you. We know it's crowded out there, so that you take any time to listen to our little sliver of the internet. It's always appreciated. And if you want more, you can check out specialmarkproductions.com for all your Movie Man needs. I've got a new written review up there of a documentary that's a horror-themed documentary called It's Coming, that tells the story of a woman who says that she has been haunted by a malevolent spirit since she was 11. And this spirit started haunting her children as well. And through serious interviews and even some evidence, it's not necessarily asking you to, as I said in my review, it's not necessarily asking you to believe in the paranormal, but it is to believe that they believe in the paranormal and how it's affecting their lives is how it's handled. And I like that quite a bit. So check out that review. And the movie's called It's Coming, and it'll be out soon. And the end here for this episode is coming, I promise. So I thank you to my panel as always. And yes, next week we will be having our penultimate pre-code movie, The Blonde Venus, which will be definitely another interesting conversation, I'm sure. So stay tuned for that, folks. Like, subscribe, and all that bells and whistles here. And until next time, we'll just say good night, everyone.
Good night.
All right.